British painter J.M.W. Turner was both prolific and peripatetic, traveling throughout England and Europe, often with a small watercolor case at his disposal. Now a rare show of watercolors Turner made throughout his career are on view at the Mystic Seaport Museum in Connecticut. And it's the only North American stop these fragile works will make. J.M.W. Turner moved from cathedrals to coasts, from the bright light of day to the deep dark of night, and from the moody tones of his native England to the luminescent glow of Venice, Italy. For the famed painter, much of it splashed down in watercolor.
I think some of his most original and expressive and experimental and groundbreaking work was actually in watercolor on paper.
It's where his ideas formed and flourished with a fervor, starting with the first watercolor he painted of this gorge at age 17. Turner painted more than 30,000 in his lifetime.
Drawing and indeed painting in watercolor was almost a compulsion. It was like a kind of a nervous tic. He just wasn't comfortable unless he was doing it.
Turner scholar David Blaney Brown is a senior curator with Tate Britain, the London museum which holds the Turner Bequest, a collection of tens of thousands of works, including these watercolors, that went to the museum after his death in 1851.
He certainly had a high opinion of himself. He wasn't a modest man. He realized that he was a great artist, and he wanted to leave a legacy to the nation, to the British nation.
Now that legacy is getting some international burnishing. The watercolors, which are extremely susceptible to light damage, can only be shown once in a generation. After stops in Italy and Argentina, the show is making its only North American appearance at Connecticut's Mystic Seaport Museum.
This is the most significant exhibition, I believe, that we have had in our 90-year existence.
So significant that 5 years ago, when the museum was building this new facility, its president, Steve White, says he told the architectural team,
the conditions and the specs for the space have to be good enough for Turner, because that for us would be the most defining exhibition.
So this, says White, is a dream come true, to marry Turner's lifelong interest in maritime painting with the Mystic River flowing just outside.
This exhibition, because of Turner, because of his expression of the sea, his expression of landscapes, he brings the spirit of this place alive in a much different way.
Do we have a sense of how he's working with movement here, or is it strictly, do you think, about color?
I think it's about movement as well, because the color has to move, doesn't it? I mean, this is a coastline. There's a storm approaching. The clouds are presumably moving quite fast, and the waves are crashing on the beach.
These are two studies for one of Turner's last exhibited watercolors. They consider Bamburgh Castle on England's northeast coast, both bathed in sun and about to be drenched in rain. They're not simply painted.
In some of the areas here, he has actually started to lift the pigment off the paper by either scratching or mopping, maybe scratching here and then perhaps mopping off some of the pigment here so that you get the white foam of the waves.
To render light or the reflection of the moon, Turner kept one fingernail long to scratch his way back to the white of his paper.
The marvelous thing about so many of the works in this exhibition is that they're not fully finished. They are private experimental works that he didn't show. You can see that in the margins there are color trials. He's been mixing his pigments and testing them for use within the image itself.
5 years ago, the Mike Leigh biopic, Mr. Turner, painted the artist as a frenzied storm of creativity.
That film was a movie, is what I will say.
In truth, says David Blaney Brown, Turner was likely much more methodical.
He must have worked with great care and great precision. Certainly in some of the images in this exhibition, they're extraordinarily finely worked. Some are minutely detailed, and instead of broad sweeping surges of paint, there are just tiny little dots, laid onto the paper almost like setting tiny diamonds into a ring.
While many of Turner's works appear ethereal and idealized, he was also fond of what art critics and historians have come to describe as litter. the little figures, animals, and general stuff that frequently dot his foregrounds.
They can look very untidy, but of course the real world is often an untidy place. He wanted to root things in reality.
Turner was also an inveterate traveler, his work changing as his landscape did, especially in Venice. The work he produced during his third and final trip there in 1840 prompted one critic to proclaim Turner a magician, with command over the spirits of earth, air, fire, and water.
The real thrill of Venice for him was probably the fact that it has this extraordinary aqueous light. For an artist who's very interested in luminous effects and how to bring light into pictures, the effect the light has and the way it seems to merge the sea and the sky is something I think that made an enormous impression on him.